Okay, so it looks like the numbers have slowed up a bit. So over to you, Jamie.
Thanks, Charlotte. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for registering and attending what we're doing this morning, which is a hospitality debate. And we've got some fantastic guests joining us this morning. My name is Jamie Allison. I'm the head of real estate in the firm here at Napthans. And I'll just whiz around the room and explain who's who. It does look like Guess Who on Zoom at times, doesn't it, with these tiles? So in my top left, I've got fellow colleague Jenny Hames, who is head of people projects here at Napthans. I've got Angela Barnes, who is a legal director in the employment team, specialising in business immigration. And we've got external guests in the chief executive of Partington Holiday Centres, Andrea Chalice, David Bremner, marketing director from Robinsons, Rachel McQueen, CEO of Marketing Lancashire, Jill Hay, who is the managing director of Cumbria Tourism, and we've got Andrew Buchanan, who's the operations director at Daniel Thwaites PLC. Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I wanted to set out four things really for us to centre our discussion around, and I'm going to try and run through those in some form of sequential, orderly manner. And I think really we'll start off with the first point for me really is seeing the positives and challenges in the hospitality sector. There's been a lot of good, bad and indifferent news in this sector, and it's been seriously challenged and suppressed in many ways, but equally in others it's bounced back, but with recurring challenges, be that recruitment, talent management, and managing a supply chain. So for me, opening up really, in terms of the positives and challenges, I'll ask Jill Hay to give us some insights from her perspective within Cumbria Tourism as to what she's been seeing in this particular sector on those 2 points, please.
I think the number one thing, morning everyone, I think the number one thing that is the forefront of everybody's minds is staff, lack of staff, and needing to get staff fast, and skilled staff as well. And it's not a new problem, particularly here in Cumbria, where we have got a really small population and we call it a super aging population. So we have been hemorrhaging young people for a long time. And that's obviously been exacerbated by the disappearance of our European staff, which we did rely on quite heavily. It's really impressive, I think, the way that the businesses, so on a positive, I think it's really impressive the way the businesses are working really hard, looking at lots of different ways in which to retain staff, but also to attract people, not just to jobs, but actually careers. And that's something I think we've got to look at really hard as an industry, about how do we change perceptions about the opportunities that there are within the hospitality sector. So I think I won't go on too much because lots of other people to talk. That, and of course rising costs, so wage inflation anyway, but inflation, energy costs, and a lot of businesses are wanting to invest in their businesses, but that's the challenge because actually you've got all of these costs that are going on. Positively, we've obviously had the staycation boom, and all of us have, whether we wanted to or not, discovered what we have here in our own beautiful country and on our doorstep. So there's a real opportunity for us to work really hard to retain those people. They might not come for their 2 weeks summer holiday, but will they come for short breaks or October half term or whatever it might be. And I think the other thing is innovation, just the fact that the way we're doing this webinar today, but lots of innovation going on within the business and looking at how they can use technology and innovation in order to address some of the challenges, including staffing. So I think they're my sort of couple of points to start with.
Thanks, Jill. And just turning to Andrew at Thwaites, in terms of the staycation boom, what sort of impact have you seen on the business as you've come into the recovery period?
Since reopening, Jamie, it's been pretty positive, really. We operate about just short of 2,000 hotel rooms, principally, and a lot in the national parks. So in the Lake District, Peak District, Yorkshire Dales parks. And those honeypot locations have certainly seen a great deal of business returning. So that I would completely echo what Jill said, that the staycation has been really, really strong. But of course, that was on the back of months and months and months of closure. So it was a little bit so it was a very welcome relief. But I'd say, yeah, we traded, particularly in our managed properties, we traded significantly better than we had forecast right the way up until December, really.
Okay, that's excellent to hear that. And Andrea, given that you also sit in that staycation boom market, I suppose, with what you do, what sort of pattern have you seen? Have you been managing an increased number of sales of units on the parks? Has the demographic changed? What sort of things have you seen yourself?
Well, we run 7 caravan parks in the northwest. Got about 1,800 pitches, and we've seen a massive increase, thank goodness. And just as was just said before, it's made up for a little bit of what was lost during the worst part of the pandemic. Our major issue is that we can't get a hold of stock. So we might have this amazing amount of people that want to be in the UK. We can't provide them with new or even second-hand caravans. So the price of those has gone absolutely through the roof, and we can't even get hold of them, basically because they can't get hold of the parts for them. We've just recently gone to one of the manufacturers, and there were about 50 caravans all ready, except for they couldn't have any windows in them, so they couldn't send them out, which is frustrating for the manufacturers and for us, and it's stopping us having the boom that we would have really have loved to have had.
Thank you. And just turning to David, you have a number of pubs like Thwaites do in honeypot areas, and a lot of yours have rooms as well. Is there anything different that you want to tell us that you're experiencing from what you've heard this morning? How are you finding it?
Hi everybody. Yeah, we similar numbers of pubs to Thwaites, but they have far more hotel rooms. We only have about 200 managed hotel rooms. But yeah, I think one of the positives that's come out of the whole thing is probably premiumization for us. Certainly people went into it drinking sort of Carling and came out drinking Moretti, or went in drinking Prosecco and came out drinking cocktails. And what that did was it mitigated quite a lot of decline with a lot of increased profit. And we're seeing that whether it's what people eat, whether they're having a better cut of steak, or we're seeing less discounting going on as a sector. So everything's kind of a bit more profitable. One of the challenges is, though, I think there's, whilst I might look at our weekly volumes and go, well, that seems okay, about right, there's a complete divide now between the wet-led businesses and those with multiple income streams, such as accommodation and food. So, you've just taken beer sales, they're probably double-digit growth in the premium pubs and nearly 20% decline in the wet-led pubs, and that's causing. And I can only think how that must apply to like other sectors such as working men's clubs and social clubs, which will be in that similar sort of wet-led downward spiral. So that's a big challenge for us. But profit-wise, listen to everyone on the call, it's a bit similar. There's a lot of demand out there. There's a lot of people that want to spend money, except in that sector where they don't. And those pubs are tied with the same wage inflation everyone on the call is seeing, the same utility cost rises. So the same sort of fixed costs are in place, but they've got a much more volatile turnover because of their basically because of their older male-led blue collar style customer.
Thank you. And turning to you, Rachel, bearing in mind what David and Andrew have been saying, Andrea, what sort of patterns of spend have you picked up in any intelligence or statistics that you may be party to? Do you have any sort of handle in terms of what a day tripper, a weekender, or a week holidayer will spend? Has it been increased? Do you find that people are spending more on food and accommodation, but less on, say, the miscellaneous spending that ordinarily they would probably look at?
Yeah, I think spend per visit is going up, and to David's point there, I think people when they are out and about are treating themselves, I suppose, a little bit more not excessively, but buying the nicer things, but also there's a corresponding change in people's own disposable income that we're going to only, I think, see increase as we go into 2022, which is going to be a challenge. And then costs for businesses as well. They're going to have to start paying back those loans that they took to see themselves through the pandemic. And obviously, we've called on government before for at least means testing the repayment of those loans, because it's going to be really hard for some businesses. I mean, the industry isn't particularly known for massive cash reserves anyway, but we did a survey with local businesses for DCMS just through Christmas and into New Year, because they were interested in the impact of Plan B, and just the response that we're getting in terms of the levels of reserves that they have and the resilience that they have to to continue to manage is really still remains very fragile. So we're just trying to do everything that we can to encourage people, both local and from further afield, to to get out and frequent these businesses, because they really need that custom.
Thank you. And just turning to my colleague Angela, whilst we listen to everybody talking about the pent-up demand, there is the premiumisation David talks about, and increased levels of activity. The ubiquitous issue we have at the moment is, of course, recruitment and retention. And in your particular role, what sorts of things are you seeing when you're speaking to people in the marketplace at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and hi, everyone. It is a problem. It's a problem that I'm seeing where I'm based here in the Lake District, but also a wider national problem in terms of recruitment. And it is a real problem. I mean, clients that I'm speaking to are saying that somebody's walking into their pub and offering their chef £10,000 more to go and work for them, and stories like that just it's echoing across the country. In terms of solutions, Jill mentioned the word innovation, and it takes a bit of creative mind, I think, to how can we keep our staff happy? We need to get them first, get them through the doors. How can we be more appealing? How can we keep them happy? And I'm sure Jenny's got comments about that. But it's also about again thinking innovatively. Can you make use of the global workforce still? So there's all sorts of problems arising from Brexit in terms of EU workers, as Jill also mentioned earlier. We don't have that pool of resources anymore. So it's, well, can we get that back, and how do we go about doing that? Can we bring skilled workers into the UK? And that's what at the moment I'm exploring with a lot of businesses, because the level of vacancies are so high. They need to think creatively, but also they need to plan for the future, because this doesn't seem to be a problem that's going to disappear overnight.
Thank you. And in terms of innovation with staffing and recruitment, we've seen various things that have evolved, I would say, over the last 6, 12, 18 months, whereby people have started to create their own academies. They've started to professionalize the roles within the hospitality sector, a bit like it's treated with the professionalism that it's seen as on the continent. What sort of things, Andrew, have you done in your business to aid the recruitment need and to manage your people?
I think in our managed business, Jamie, we I've started to use all sorts of different platforms. We recruiting electronically. We have looked at sourcing from outside the EU, bringing particularly chefs in from India through sponsored employer status. And in our leased and tenanted business, I think a lot of those smaller independent operators that David referred to, what they're actually going around it by increased periods of closure, particularly early part of the week, simply to compensate. If they've only got a kitchen team that can work 5 days a week, then they only open the kitchen 5 days a week and tend to close on a Monday and a Tuesday, which is stifling that growth coming back out of the pandemic. So there's not a lot of innovation. It's not that people can't recruit. It's not that they can't recruit because of the salary being offered. It's because people can't recruit because no one turns up. They either nobody applies or I was speaking to a really, really good operator last week who's had jobs posted for months and might have had 30 or 40 applicants or applications, and invited people for interview and seeing one or two out of that lot actually turn up. So it's very, very difficult to recruit when the market there aren't people there. So it's certainly one of it's not the only challenge, but it's one of the main challenges.
And so I'll just jump in there because I think Andrew and I are in sort of similar sized businesses where we're also not quite big enough to grab hold of this and train our own people consistently. And our training department, has sort of 3 people in it, and that's to kind of to train people on an ongoing basis with health and safety and all sorts. We haven't got, like a chef academy that can start bringing people through and training them properly. We all pay into this apprenticeship levy pot, but it's a bugger to know how to deal with it. You need almost an administrator just on the apprenticeship levy. The best support we ever got in years was when Manchester Chamber of Commerce funded somebody to come into our business for a year and help us to develop an apprenticeship program. And we got to between 50 and 100 apprentices coming through that were members of staff that had never done anything else and had just always been in a pub, but quite fancied having a qualification. And we attracted people in, we retained people, we promoted people. But again, once that funding went, it was really hard to sustain it as a business when we were going to have to bear all of that sort of internal cost. And that was before the levy came in. I'd love to see more help in that area.
Turning to Jenny on these innovation aspects, what sorts of things are you seeing people do to really push the envelope to recruit and or develop people? Because you really are in the sharp end when it comes to this kind of dialogue, aren't you, in our client base? Do you want to just share some insights for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And it definitely comes back to Andrew's point in that the issue that we're seeing is that, we can post an advert and, where we would have those 30 or 40 applicants and have a pool of people to choose from. The market is moving so quickly that they've either applied for a number of jobs and then already got one by the time we're offering them an interview, or they're just not interested because they're following the same cycle that perhaps candidates have done previously, where they'll, unfortunately, let's just be honest, apply for jobs and not seriously be interested in working. And that's the position that we're still in, even in this day and age. We do need to be quick, and we need to be thinking about strategic recruitment, so almost recruiting before the need arises. And I know we're very much in this reactionary state at the moment, but workforce planning is a key point that I'm seeing lots of clients adopt at the moment, anticipating their needs before they even realise that they have them, and realising that the turnover of staff is so high that you almost need to be backfilling all the time rather than wait for that individual to resign or be promoted. So using HR metrics and data to actually assess what your workforce needs are, and recruiting that particular way is very, very handy to do so. Other innovative ideas is not going out to your usual job boards, thinking about your target market, so using social media more and more. We've seen a turn of that for the pandemic, that individuals are just glued to technology, looking at aspirational living, using Instagram, using Pinterest, using Facebook and whatnot. And therefore, if we're thinking about attracting a different type of individual for a different method, social media is a huge impact. So it's different to LinkedIn. It's not a professional network. It's something that we can actually use as an interim stopgap to help our brand and employer brand up there. So that's what I'm seeing at the minute.
Thanks, Jen. I can see that Andrew wants to come in at this point. Andrew, have you got any reliance on social media for that sort of thing?
We have. I just wanted to make a slightly different point, that I think it's in the time that we do need to go down the social media route to attract people, we also need to really look after the people that we've got. And I think that the personal side of making people feel cared about and feeling part of something is absolutely essential. When the government supported companies by helping to pay the wages, we decided that we weren't going to let any of our team go at all. We were very lucky with that, including 40 seasonal team members who would normally have left us in the winter. We kept them on all the way through. Because of that, and having a weekly telephone call from their managers all the way through lockdown, not just a text or an email, they all got telephone calls every week to find out how they were. And at the end of it, we lost one person. So they did all of that. On top of that, I think it's really important that we are genuinely caring for people, because, you know, if you do care, they will feel like they're part of your team. So I personally have a half-hour one-to-one meeting with every single member of a new member of the team. We've got about, at the moment, I think we've got about 270. So we're not a massive company, but it still takes up a lot of my time. And I find out about who they are, who their families are, the important personal side. And I think that's something that a lot of people have lost because they've been stuck at home and not having anybody to interact with. And it's been really, really important. So it's just a different side to things, really.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Great commentary from everybody there. One thing I wanted to touch on as well is there's been quite a few changes which I think may be here to stay. And I just wanted to throw this on the table really with everybody. What has changed with tourism, and is that change going to be permanent? Now, one thing that I have seen, and I've seen it in quite a few places, is the back office teams. So where you may well have had a centrally located team that has to commute into an office, let's say for the sake of argument, it's in a hotel group, those operators are operating from home in terms of managing reservations and bookings, for example. So it allows you to attract and retain people that you need for that sales or customer service function. What sorts of other things have you guys around the table seen that is a little bit innovative, a little bit different, suits people, but allows the business to run in a more effective or innovative way? Does anyone want to go first?
I'm happy to chip in with a couple of things that I've seen. So yeah, absolutely seeing some of that. Also, just businesses looking at how they can streamline what they do. So you're seeing that menus, for example, are being streamlined, or for another example that I think is quite common now is asking your customers before they arrive to almost pre-book a lot of the things that they want, so that when they get there, things are ready for them. And I think it's also things like trying to reduce split shifts. And making the job more appetizing, if you like, and lots of perks and benefits that are being added as well to staff, for staff from health and well-being. I love what Andrea was saying earlier on. I think that's, you know, you're an absolute model of what businesses need to be like, and I think a lot have been, but the problem is that not all have been, and the onus is on all of us within the industry to be the standard that we need to see.
Rachel, just come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that some of the innovations for consumers as well have been things that I think will stay. So, you know, all attractions that might not have done pre-booked slots before, who have had to do that in order to manage capacities through the pandemic, but have actually found it gives the visitor a better experience because you're smoothing out some of those peaks and troughs that might otherwise happen through the day. So it allows them to give a better experience to the visitor, and it's better for the visitors too, to get that sense that they're not going to come in at a massively busy part of the day. So some of the things like that, I think, you know, people will absolutely continue. You know, great, even like small innovations. Bless Andrea, we had a spotlight on Andrea Partington's when they turned horse boxes into little mobile bars to have them round the holiday park, rather than necessarily everybody having to come to the main centre all the time. So I think there's loads of things like that that people have found, you know, through necessity actually really, really work, and extra special things that we can do for our visitors and make sure that they are having that great time. And even when, you know, we are struggling with capacities in staffing, that these businesses have found ways to still offer excellent service, even if they're doing so at slightly under the staffing levels that they might have been looking for previously. So yeah, I think a lot of that will continue, and I think it can only benefit hopefully the sector and the consumers going forwards.
Yeah, I think technology in our business must have jumped forward about 6 years in a year. You know, we I wouldn't want another lockdown, but we all suddenly did projects that we'd never have had time to do. You know, we're now paying so much more attention to review sites, where our direct bookings versus booking.com OTAs is completely reversed. People trust us more to book direct. Database management's better. You can book a table, you can order before you get there. We've got pubs that will always now do takeaway food, so the service is better. And the ones that built their social media and used it during the lockdown are now so loved in their communities versus the ones that didn't, and frankly were just a pub. And I think there's so many great positives that have come out, and I don't see any of those going backwards again. I can't see why you wouldn't want to have table service in a pub in most instances these days. You know, whoever wanted to queue at the bar, it just I think there's a lot of things that, you know, and I'm not just saying from a female perspective. With the order and pay thing at the table, you know, we were so surprised that we did some survey work on this. The most common person that commented on it was somebody that was on their own. They just didn't want to leave their table to go to the bar and leave their dog or leave their newspaper, and you just thought, who thought that was going to be a big thing? So anyway,
I think there's also a huge trend that pubs can pick up on, and indeed many hospitality venues can pick up on home delivery. That has really come to the floor and to the fore, and we've seen some of the multinational chains. You can't watch a TV program without watching an advert for a delivery company and using one of the global food brands as a lead on that. And there's so many innovative ways of using dark kitchens or the dark branding that pubs can really dial into. And they might end up with 4 or 5 different food brands being delivered out of the same kitchen, and meeting the demands and needs of customers. The whole plant-based eating, more vegetarian eating, all of those trends come into the fore. They're trends that we have always seen. I mean, the only thing that's absolutely certain in hospitality is change. All of those things coming through, all of those initiatives coming through. But to David's point, just through the pandemic, they've come through so much quicker, and being able to react to them is absolutely vital. And the other change is the day pattern. We've seen a huge shift downwards in post 9 p.m. trading. And I think through lockdown, I think we all got used to going to bed at 10 o'clock. And we weren't used to being out and about. And to David's point about the wet-led pubs, that's probably hit them much more than say a food-led pub. So how we re-engage, how we get those people back out into pubs, later on in the evening, I think is a challenge. Or we find other ways. There's lots of other ways of doing it. It just it requires a mindset that is open to change and open to trialing new things, new innovation.
Just to jump in on there, if that's all right, just thinking about all of the suggestions that you've made, and obviously all the fabulous innovations that you have made. It's really important that as businesses, and for anyone who's listening as well, that they're actually promoting those from an employer branding point of view as well, not just from a consumer point of view. So being proud of what you've achieved, where you've come from in this pandemic journey to where you actually aim to be in the future. to support your staff as well, because obviously they've been at the coalface and they've been in that moment with you. It's perhaps easy for them to get lost in the moment and forget all the actual achievements and innovations that have been made. So obviously, if you're promoting that internally through your employer branding, it will also roll out to support recruitment of candidates in the future, because they will realise how much you've done, how much you've achieved, and how much you've really put your head above the parapet to lead the way when it comes to hospitality and tourism. So that's a great benefit that you can use in your favour, and make sure you're publicising that again through social media, but also on your own website as well. Make sure you've got your own section for existing staff and for new candidates, so it's a shop window into what their experience would look like when they come to work for you and when they do work for you.
I think you're right, Jenny. The one thing I've seen quite a lot of over the last 12-18 months is operators who will be promoting mixologist of the week, or management of the week, or server of the week, or chef of the week, and there's a lot more of that. And I think you're right, it supports the cause for bolstering the recruitment campaign when they're recognising the staff and the skills that they've got. Jill, have you got anything to add in terms of any permanency you think will be here from any changes stemming from the pandemic for operators?
I don't know. The one thing that's really sort of making me wonder at the moment is we have seen a shift in terms of visitor behaviour. So people have been coming, and yes, they have been prepared to spend more, but in fewer places and fewer interactions. And I think indoor attractions, have really struggled. So it'll be very interesting to see this year and into next year how whether it goes back to normal, or whether people do tend to stay in clusters, if you like, and stay in groups. Obviously, we're the Lake District in Cumbria, so we are known for our outdoors, but there's been a big trend in terms of people coming and staying somewhere in a group, in a bubble, and going out for a really nice walk, but perhaps not doing that secondary spend that they would previously have done. So it's just, for me, I just want to see some of that come back.
Okay. Is that something that you see mirrored as well, Rachel, in your member place throughout Marketing Lancashire?
Yeah, I think that we have that kind of mix of rural, coastal, and then town and city centres as well. And I think that we have seen a bit of a shift in visitor behaviour, some of which has been to our benefit in people looking for more kind of outdoor activities and things to do. But the flip side of that is you don't spend so much money in the outdoors, and we need to get people into the business and spending in the businesses. So I think that there's as we look ahead to 2022, we're talking about opportunities. I mean, there is a lot going on in this country in 2022. Obviously, the opening up of international travel is both a challenge and an opportunity in terms of wanting to welcome those visitors back to the UK, but also then the competition between people having that holiday at home and or going abroad again now, as that becomes more possible and more appealing. So we're gonna be fighting for it again, for our share of domestic tourism. But I think that there's a lot of potential for us to just try and make sure. Somebody mentioned earlier as well the shift in demographics. I think you were asking about it in terms of Andrew and people coming on those kind of different holidays than that they might have ever considered before. And I think we achieved some of that last year, and I think people found that they enjoyed it more than they thought they would. So they might have been forced into a domestic holiday that actually now they've decided is a good thing and something that they might keep up for a broader demographic. And I think it's the kind of footedness of our businesses that have been able to turn their offer into something that broader demographic is interested in. And I think that that's really something that we can build on into 2022 as well.
Yes, agreed. Thank you for that. I'd like to change the topic, and I'm going to try and avoid some of the topics that are in the press relating to the word government. But what two things from government don't we see that we think would help our sector that we want to see? And I know Andrew is backwards and coming forward, so I'll ask him first, if that's okay. What two things do you think we need to see in our sector that we don't currently have?
If I'm going to pick two, I'm going to pick two a little bit from left field. I'm sure others will talk about the VAT impact and business rates. But I'd ask government to look very closely at what legislation is coming down the pipeline. And at a time when hospitality businesses, who are massive job creators in this country and massive opportunity creators, particularly for young people, we are still seeing layer upon layer upon layer of legislation. We've got calorie labelling, which is coming over the hill for any employer or for any business that employs more than 250 people. And you have to think, who on earth has come up with this? The time that it's taking to install or to put this onto menus, and for what benefit, when a huge number of hospitality businesses fall outside of the scope. So it's a big burden on large businesses where the parameters of accuracy and calorific labelling are so wide as to make it absolutely nonsensical. We've also got at some point in time we'll have the challenge of a drink deposit return scheme, which is fast looming in Scotland, and I'm sure will be coming south of the border very quickly. All well-minded, but I think in some instances government fails to realise the impact of what they're doing. And the other thing that we're not seeing anything of, I can't see the government are doing anything about the crisis in people. I'll quote a stat, and hopefully it's accurate, but I think before the pandemic, there were 800,000 job vacancies, something of that ilk in the UK, and there's now 1.2 million. That's a 50% increase in job vacancies. That tells me that there just are not enough people in the UK to fill the jobs that we need and to do the jobs that are required. And they were coming from other countries, and we've stopped that. So the government has cut off that lifeline of employment. And in doing that, of course, the more people that the country employs, the more taxation that the Chancellor benefits from. So, if all of our businesses were fully staffed and the trading to their optimum, then they would be taking more money, they would be spending more money on labour, and the Chancellor would in turn be benefiting from the taxation that ensues from that. So those are the two things that I think.
Thank you. David, what would you say?
I'll echo what Andrew says about calories, by the way. That is just, and nobody's going to audit it. So, what's the point? So, but and I'll say a couple of another ones. I think we need to start seriously looking at what spiraling utility costs are doing to the sector. We're now in a situation, I know I'll harp on about wet-led pubs, but only because they kind of get forgotten in this whole staycation thing, because they don't have a food opportunity and they don't have accommodation necessarily. But if you were a new licensee now trying to get on a utility tariff, you're in our business, it would be about the same equivalent as your rent. You're looking at £12,000 to £15,000 a year just to get started. That's the equivalent to your rent. If you want, Sky and BT on top of that, it's another £10,000 to £12,000. So I think the costs of the fixed costs of running business are just getting too high. Somebody else can talk about rates, but eventually something's got to give, because you've got a turnover decline at 20%, as I mentioned earlier, and all of these fixed costs that remain in place, and we're just staring at 10,000 pubs disappearing here, and nobody's moving towards it. The other thing that maybe nobody else would mention, other maybe Andrew on the call, was probably something around beer duty. There's a body called Long Live the Local that is kind of powered by the BBPA, I think, British Beer and Pub Association, and they lobby government pretty hard on beer duty and what have you. But you know, I do think for the first time, actually, this beer duty thing is a massive issue, but I wish we could find a way of differentiating between different kind of styles of pubs, because we seem to give the same benefit to all the pubs without being a little bit more sniper fire about protecting certain businesses. So I'm not saying no beer duty, and that would just be such a big income stream for the government, but there's got to be a fairer way of applying it. And I know that they're looking at a couple of things coming into force in spring 2023, but I'd like to see those brought forward in terms of, you know, lower duty rates for smaller producers like Thwaites and Robinsons, who frankly are family-run businesses who have been here 100 and 200 years and will be here for another 200 years and genuinely look after people, to the detriment of profit sometimes.
Thank you. I can see that's heartfelt as well, but yeah, very important. Thanks very much. Andrea, what would you say?
I'd like to see some way of being able to promote the tourism trade as being a little bit more sexy to move into, and that it's a career rather than just something that you might do before you go to university. You might just, you know, do a few shifts. Because if you look in some other countries, it's a career, and you're proud of doing what you do. I went to a restaurant in Atlanta, and there's a waiting list to get into working in this restaurant because they're so proud of working there. It just seems like it's a starting role in your life, and it should be a career. So, and that really starts in schools and getting people to realise that there, you know, that it's a good career to be in. There's lots of things. It's flexible, different hours to work around. You know, children being in school or whatever. There's lots of really good sides of it. The other side is for us, changing legislation over the last 2 years has been so fast. But it hasn't given us a chance to even breathe. Things have landed on us. Our customers think that we know about these things before they happen. Right at the very beginning, I know things had to work quickly at the beginning of 2020, but we had changes in legislation which were really impactful on us that were just thrown in at 4:30 in the morning that we're expected to react to the next day. So a little bit more consideration to companies regarding changes in legislation.
Thank you. Jill, just touching on one of the points that Andrea raised there about professionalising the sector, would you just share a bit of insight in terms of what you saw as an organisation with the, I'm going to call it a skills fair that you held in Barrow?
Yeah, so early on last year, it was, you know, as soon as businesses began to start to open up, it was obvious that we were going to have this crisis in recruitment. So we did a lot of things actually as Cumbria Tourism. So normally, obviously, we're a destination marketing and management organisation, and our focus is generally on the marketing to the visitors. But obviously, we had to shift. So we ran a recruitment campaign, which is called Perfect Place to Work. And it was very much along the lines that Jenny said. So it was really trying to target younger demographics, but also people who maybe were semi-retired or people that were looking for part-time work as well in and outside the county. And we were working really closely with our MPs, and there are pockets of worklessness in Cumbria along the coast, in particular on the West Coast and Barrow. And we have 5 out of our 6 MPs are Conservative, and the message that we were getting back very clearly was, look, you've got to work on the unemployed first. That's what we need. And that is easier said than done, because you have a lot of logistical challenges in terms of getting people from the areas of worklessness into the centres. You've got the cost of travel, the length of time of travel. And also, you know, working really close with some of the colleges and Inspire, DWP, a lot of these people who are unemployed need a lot of support, quite frankly, and that support really isn't necessarily there, and you can't always put square pegs into round holes. So it isn't as easy as saying we've got X number of people unemployed, we've got X number of vacancies, so just put them into that. That is not going to work on its own. So yes, we ran a recruitment event in Barrow, and we've got another one coming up in Kendal. We were up at a skills fair in Carlisle recently. And there is interest, absolutely there is interest, and we can fill some of those vacancies, but I think it's like Andrew said, you know, it's an awful lot of time and money and effort that's going in to be able to just secure a couple of places. And that's a huge challenge for us. I mean, we were talking about the tourism recovery plan, and Rachel will probably agree with me that it's great to have a plan there, but we had a tourism sector deal a couple of years ago, and that in my view was stronger and had a really strong piece there about recruitment, about career development, about skills development, and about a national campaign that went alongside that. Now, I know that there is a board that it's a tourism and hospitality board that is working that up at the moment, but frankly, we needed that, you know, a few years ago, not just now, but we are where we are, and we have to deal with that. I'd like to see the government listening to us in terms of the immediate crisis that we have, and being prepared to relax some of the legislation to allow some of the European or Commonwealth workers to come forward and work with us. You know, I will talk about the VAT rate and the business rates. We are not competitive with our international counterparts. So what, now that we are relaxing and allowing people to, making it easier for people to go on holiday abroad, and we've got all these increased costs coming at our end, we are not going to be as competitive. And if the government really does recognise the opportunities for growth, and there's a fantastic paper that's being put together by the Tourism Alliance and partners around rebuilding Britain's tourism industry, there's a 10-point plan in there, and that's the plan that the government needs to be following.
Thank you. You touched on that and rates for both Judith and Andrew. Do you want to elaborate further on that, Andrew? What would you like to see from those two perspectives specifically?
Sorry, Jamie, I missed that. We cracked up a little bit. The two perspectives were
on VAT and rates.
Yeah, well, Jill mentioned being competitive, and the tourism sector or the hospitality sector has a huge taxation burden. On alcohol duty, on VAT, on business rates, and it is simply not sustainable. I would say that the support that government has given our sector through the pandemic has been life-saving. The furlough has been really good. The grants system, there was flaws in it, of course, but broadly speaking, it was very positive. And I think a great many hospitality businesses would simply not be here today if it wasn't for that government support. So first and foremost, tick, well done. But let's get our head up. Let's start looking a little bit further forward and seeing what is coming over the hill. That competitiveness that Jill mentioned with other countries, the taxation burden that we face versus other countries is beyond comparison. So David alluded to alcohol duty. I think there's probably three levers that government can pull to various degrees. One is alcohol duty, one is business rates, and one is VAT. All three can be tailored to meet the needs of the hospitality sector and allow it to grow, allow it to employ young people, allow it to give young people the confidence. I mean, how many people do we know whose first job was in hospitality and they entered into the hospitality sector grunting at people and left the holiday sector being able to hold a conversation? To Andrea's point earlier, the hospitality sector is a career-based sector. And we could all give so many examples of people who start on the shop floor and end up in the boardroom. And I don't think there are many sectors where that doesn't happen. But to your point, Jamie, I think the government seriously needs to look at extending the variable rate of VAT. That we currently enjoy at 12.5% on food and accommodation. But that doesn't help the wet-led pub. And I don't think that we would expect. I don't think there is any expectation that we would like to see a cut in alcohol duty and then a cut in the VAT on alcohol. I think that's probably too much of an ask. But certainly the business rate, the system, where you have small, relatively small businesses, small independent pubs, they may be paying 12 up to £25,000 a year in business rates that were based on turnovers from, in some cases, 12, 15 years ago, when the world was such a different place. So it's so inflexible. And at the same time, an online delivery company's built a gargantuan warehouse next door to you, and paying virtually the same in business rates. It's just bust. And government really need to realise that and do something about it. So I don't think that we can highlight one or two individual elements of taxation that we would like the government to address, but rather than parcel it up and say, look, you need to look at this whole thing, because we are just ludicrously overtaxed.
Yeah, I agree with that, Andrew. Thank you very much for saying. Rachel, is there anything you'd like to add to that in terms of what you want to see come out of government?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I agree with everything that's been said, but I think, just at a headline level, we need to see value of the tourism and hospitality sector from government, value of it as an employer, value of it as to all of the, extra softer benefits it brings to places, the quality of life that it brings to places. I've said it before, there is no T in DCMS, and I think that comes with an inherent issue. The government seems to value other parts, but also tourism is reliant on so much more than just DCMS, tourism and hospitality. There is now an interministerial group, I think, for the visitor economy, as they call it, but that's Treasury, Cabinet Office, Department for Transport, Home Office, Department, DEFRA, BAYS, the Levelling Up departments, pretty much the whole of government. And yet I don't think, that there's still, even though I very much hope that if anything comes out of this pandemic, it is that recognition of the value of tourism and hospitality to this country's economy, and to this country's attractiveness, not just to visitors, but actually to investors and to, to everybody else, people that we want to come and study here, and all of those types of things. But they need to be more consistent in driving that through, and we need a response to the DMO review. Jill and I, not just for our own organisations, but this is, they invested in a very quite a thorough review as to what the government needs to do to support the structures around tourism and hospitality in England, because they just aren't addressed in the same way that they are in Scotland and in Wales. Some great recommendations in there, not necessarily all perfect, but some good, strong things for government to follow. That at the moment they've just accepted, well, they've not even accepted the report. The report's been written, and no response has come through. So I think for me it's about that recognition in government of the importance of the sector, and some practical, all of the things that have been said about practical ways to support it going forwards.
Thank you. We're coming near to the end of our hour, believe it or not, and in finishing, I just want to touch on closing the gap that was identified in the tourism recovery plan, which was published in June of last year, which basically says that it predicts tourism in the UK to return in full to the 2019 levels of volume and expenditure in 2025. Quite a bold statement, and also quite a big gap of time. My question is, how do we close that span of time, bearing in mind some of the variables that most of which are in our control, and there are some big ones that aren't We've talked about innovation. We've talked about some asks of the government this morning in terms of what we want to see. But what other things do you think we could see or we want to see happen that closes that gap to help us recover quickly or more quickly in our tourism sector? I'll go to David with this one, please, if I may first. Have you got any views on that, please, Mr. Bremner?
I thought you'd start with me because of how thoroughly I read the document. So yeah, I'm to be honest with you, Jamie, we're probably at 2019 levels. Looking ahead and not being funny, but it's probably more profitable than it was in 2019 as well.
Yeah,
we've tweaked rates and we're getting far more direct bookings. We used to get about 33% direct. It's now nearly 66% because people got fed up of being bumped by a commission by some of the booking websites during the first lockdown. So I think the paper presumably is talking about UK tourism and how to attract more overseas people to the UK by 2025. But frankly, I don't think I'm all that bothered from a Robinson's perspective. We don't really mind where they come from. And we're certainly filling up fast. And particularly those, Andrew mentioned, or somebody mentioned honeypot locations earlier, but it's those sites that fill first. You know, we're pretty full in the summer in the Lake District already. And there are sites that have still got room to fill that depended more on sort of commuter travel or business travel, but they do surprise us. They do keep filling. So I'm not sure if that answers the question nobly or not, but that's kind of where we are on it.
No, it does. Thank you. And Andrew, do you share that position as well, given that it's a similar sector?
I do, and we are about at the same as 2019 at the moment, but what we've got to do is to realise that on the horizon, people are going to start going abroad. So for us, we've got to be doing something to attract people to stay with us now, and that's looking at what younger people coming through wanting to go on holiday want to do, and they're expecting you to be more green. So we've got to make lots and lots of changes, which are expensive changes, to attract people to think about that. The other thing that we've been looking at is that people may not go abroad if they've now bought a dog, because there's a terrific amount of people that once they've been stuck inside have bought a dog. So we've had to change everything around that. So we're looking at opening up bars that we never would have allowed animals into, to be looking at that, because our customers who aren't going to want to go away because they don't want to put their dogs in kennels want to go somewhere they can take the dogs. So it's continuously changing to try and keep this momentum that has been provided by people not being able to go abroad and being restricted, really.
Just on the dog point, you'll also find that employees don't want to work permanently from site because they've bought pets as well. So we're getting a lot of pushback from individuals who bought pets in lockdown, and then when offices, locations reopened, actually said, well, what am I going to do about my childcare for my dog? And that was a genuine concern for a lot of employers. So generally working flexibly is obviously a plus, but there's other considerations. It's not just children anymore, it's pets. And as bizarre as it sounds, it's definitely about life balance now, as opposed to just considering you work 9 to 5, you work on a shift, you don't have anything at home, but you now have goldfish, cats, pets, or generally to think about.
I suspect there's probably been a varied response from some of the employers in relation to that, Jen, has there?
Yeah, very varied. No further comment on that.
Angela, would you like to comment on anything that you've heard so far in terms of how we think we close that span of time? David and Andrea have said something very similar, that they're more or less there. What about what you're seeing with any of the clients that we look after?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch again on the immigration piece, and the problems that Brexit has caused in terms of recruitment, and to actually go back to the challenges as well, and what I would like to see the government doing differently, Jamie, it's just to be more proactive. You know, Jill mentioned about the fact that we need some relaxation of the immigration rules. I appreciate the government will not want to do a full U-turn on that, but we have seen them relaxing the rules. So we've had, you know, the poultry workers coming in, we've had workers in edible horticulture. My concern, and if we want to move forward and we want to get back to where we were, I think the government need to work more closely with the third parties to find out what this crisis of recruitment shortages is going to look like in the summer in the lakes, for example. So are we going to have waiters and waitresses? So we're looking here at what the government have called lower skilled workers. Are we going to have anybody to wait on tables or to serve our beer without the government doing something proactive to assess that problem, see what it's going to look like, and then decide, well, should we be relaxing the rules to help businesses overcome that problem? But I'd like to see them do it now, not do it in July and August when it's going to be too late.
Yeah, I suppose if we were talking about what Andrea identified before in terms of pushing things through quickly, if they can do things quickly in other areas, surely they can react quickly in things that really matter to the sector like this. Absolutely.
That's it. Well, if we can do it for poultry workers with a month to go to Christmas, I'm sure we can do it for hospitality quickly as well.
Yeah,
and it doesn't feel like that should be all that hard either. I mean, we need 44 chefs. We got 23 managed pubs, so let's call it 2 a pub, multiply it by pubs. It shouldn't be that hard to go. There's probably that bigger challenge out there for recruiting people. Now, whether you can make education or chef training sexy long term is one thing, but short term, you're right. This summer's coming fast, and we need 44 chefs now, and we don't play nasty. We're not going to go and walk into places and offer 10 grand more than you get now. So unfortunately, that means we probably lose more than we win. But it's going nowhere as a challenge.
That's it. And the reality is, as we've mentioned before, pubs and restaurants are having to close on certain days because they can't get chefs to cook the food. And that is, I am hearing that from so many clients that it's a real problem, and something needs to be done about that.
Yes, Jill. Oh, you're on mute.
I'm not now. I totally agree with that. And one of my big concerns here, because we did see this last year, is when visitors came and they hadn't booked ahead or they weren't residential, they were really struggling to get some of the food and drink experiences that they are part of your holiday. I went to Cornwall, I had exactly the same. I spent more money in Tesco than anywhere else, not because I wanted to, but that's where I could get food and drink, basically. And I think that we've got to be careful. We've worked really hard over the last 2 years to give our staycationers a really great experience, but they're not going to keep coming back if they can't get that great experience and that they feel that it's good value for money. People will pay more if it's a quality experience, but if it's not a good experience, then they won't. And we then start to undermine ourselves.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody. That's us. That's time up. I'd like to thank you all for giving me some of your time this morning. You really are outstanding advocates and representatives of the sector. So thank you all for tuning in, for the viewers that are logged in, and thanks everybody around the table for joining us this morning. Have a great day.
Bye.